So this week, series 32 of The Simpsons was uploaded to Disney Plus here in the UK. And I have been following the show for a long time. My interest in it kind of waned about maybe season 20, but I've continued with it, and in the last few years, I've found it to actually be getting better with its gags and what it is. It's one of the longest running TV shows of all time, and for anyone that grew up in the 90s and early 2000s in the UK, we saw it every day at 6 p.m. on BBC Two, shortly followed by The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. I mean, what a time that was. It ran for a long time in that configuration before moving to Channel 4 in late 2004, where we saw new episodes of the show. In all that time, though, since about 1990, 91, it had been showing on Sky. But if you didn't have Sky, BBC One was the first place you would have seen it, possibly, on a Saturday. It seems quite bizarre that they took that long to get it, but there we are. At least it came here eventually. I've lost count of the amount of times I've seen episodes from those first sort of 5 to 10 seasons. And this week, actually, coincidentally, I sold my seasons of The Simpsons on DVD, which I bought about a decade ago, mostly in a bundle, and I had season 1 to 11. They were my favorite seasons, and I just felt like it was time to let go, primarily for space, but also because they are all available, most of them anyway, bar say one episode is available on Disney Plus. They're on Channel 4 all the time, and I'd seen all of the special features on those discs and heard all of the commentaries, and so it felt like the right time, right, to do that. And my interest in the show has kind of gone more into a nostalgia thing, as in, you know, I'm going to revisit it once in a while, and it's available, right? So what I thought I would do in this episode, and believe me, I've done several takes of this, and I had one take that was like 20 minutes, and I decided to stop and try and refine it a little bit. And I have done, and this is what you're going to hear now. Brand new, right here, I'm going to tell you 10 episodes from the first 5 seasons that I have really fond memories of. Now, I could sit here and talk about all 32 seasons, but that would take a while. I could talk about 10 seasons, but again, I was on 20 minutes and I was only on like selection 7 or 8 of 25. So I've cut it down to 10, just talking about the first 5 seasons. And we start with Simpsons roasting on an open fire from season 1. It's episode 1. It's the first episode that was ever aired, and it was a holiday special that really set the tone. And that season, the first season's really weird because you have the Rugrats style animation. Everything's moving. They're not sure what it is yet. It looks quite kiddie, I guess, in a way, and I think that perhaps confused people. It was the first season of the show, after all. It wasn't going to come out of the bat completely, formed. But I find that show really cute in that era, right? And I remember watching those episodes and it looking ancient, right? Ancient. Looked like they'd done it, say, 5 years before the second season. But that's just kind of the style, isn't it? But Simpsons roasting on an open fire, I love the story of it. It's really it could have been an episode of any sitcom from the last 40 years. It didn't really have any cartoon tendencies. It did what it was meant to do. It was a family sitcom, just happened to be a cartoon. And the beginning, I think it was something of a stigma attached to it that it was a kids show, right? Because it's animated. Because to most people, it seemed at the time, if it was animated, it was for children. But my next selection from season 1, episode 9, Life on the Fast Lane, it is far from a children's show. Because in this episode, with guest star Albert Brooks, Marge essentially has an affair with a bowling instructor. Because Homer buys her a bowling ball on her birthday, because he has this tendency to buy gifts for her that are actually for him. Even has his name on the ball, it's for his fingers. She decides, I'm going to do it anyway, and we see Homer go into, dad mode, takeaway dad mode, trying to feed the kids while Marge goes off on a bowling lesson. And of course, she makes that choice at the end to stay with her husband. And as was said in the later clip show, thank goodness she drove down that ironic street. So yeah, it's not a kids show. And that episode proved it. My favorite line from that episode is when Albert Brooks, or Jacques, as the character's name was, there's a couple of lines. One of them is when he asks for more onion rings in a very non-French accent, and when he says he's going to strike out tonight, and of course you don't see him again. So let's go on to the next episode, Itchy and Scratchy and Marge, from season 2, episode 9, where the show is looking a little bit more like the Simpsons that you know and love. And if you're unsure which episode this is, it's the one where Maggie does a psycho takeoff, right? Where she sees Itchy and Scratchy with a mallet. Homer then gets hit on the head with a mallet, and he pulls the curtain down. You know the rest. I love the way that Maggie runs away in that episode. It's very comical. It's very well done. And again, this episode kind of prioritizes story over anything wacky. That's probably the most wacky thing that happens in that episode. The rest of it is about cartoon violence and asking the question of whether children are being watched by their parents. What are you watching? What is that? And I love the questions that Marge asks in that, and they're very relevant ones, certainly at that time. And she gets Itchy and Scratchy changed, doesn't she? Until she refuses to say anything about Michelangelo's David. It's such an interesting episode that was brought up in a college lecture once, and I can't remember why. I've been sat here trying to think why that was, but that just shows you, doesn't it, that this show in itself wasn't just a crazy cartoon or this adult thing with a load of jokes in it. There was actually some meaning to it that asked questions, certainly in the early days, and that is what Itchy and Scratchy and Marge did. So the next selection of mine, and I should point out that this isn't particularly what I think are the best episodes. They're just ones that I have a great fondness for. And The Way We Was from season 2, episode 12, is one of the first flashback episodes where Homer meets Marge for the first time. And this is, I think, where they go wrong a little bit now. The timeline's been messed up. Back in the day, they were in 1974. That is when Homer and Marge were at high school. So they were able to be a lot more specific. Now it's gone a little bit Goldbergsy, where they'll be in the 80s and it's all mixed up. But then it was like the music we're hearing is relevant and everything around it, and the fashion is all very much of a single stream of consciousness. which I really like. It really brought those characters to life. And obviously, this is the one with the prom and the first appearance of Artie Ziff, who is a great character. They don't use him enough. Let's go on to the next one. Saturdays of Thunder, Season 3, Episode 9. One of those episodes that springs to mind when I think of those days of having my dinner after school and then switching on BBC Two for The Simpsons. And that episode always seemed to be on. And again, prioritizing story over sort of cartoon comedy. Because this is where Homer finds out something about Bart, and this is where Bart realizes the importance of family, and of course ends up winning the race at the end and presented by one of his heroes who you kind of get the impression did something a long time ago, right? And then he's smaller than Bart. That's kind of bizarre. So we go on to the next one, Colonel Homer, Season 3, Episode 20. It's basically all about country music. It's the episode with Beverly D'Angelo in it, and she plays Lurleen Lumpkin, a waitress who's discovered by Homer, and he decides to finance her music career. And there's lots of things said about country music. I wonder whether in the UK a lot of the jokes perhaps went over people's heads. I love the weird kind of signing thing they do, you know, when she's singing the song and they're pressing the records and then Maggie kisses the record. Again, it's story over cartoon thing, but I like those little touches, and one of the early examples of Maggie being used in a sort of comedic way rather than just a baby. And of course, again, another adult setup, because Lurleen kind of has the hots for Homer. Stand by your manager is a great pun, by the way. And he decides not to go through with it. And I love the way that she kind of explains it to Marge through song, through the TV, just so that, you know, we can have a conclusion. This early one is one of my favorites. The music in it is top notch. The next episode I shall talk about here is Season 3, Episode 22, The Otto Show. This is the one with Spinal Tap in it, and apparently it cost them a lot of money, because not only did they have to pay for Spinal Tap, all the music in it, I mean, Freebird is in that thing. I love that scene with Homer in the car after the rock concert and Spanish Flea. I bet that introduced the work of Herb Alpert to so many people. And I've been wondering all this time whether there are actually any words to it, or whether that is completely of Homer's making. And yeah, I'm aware that Homer isn't real, but, you know, let's keep the illusion up here. So the Otto Show is great. It's an episode of sort of 2 or 3 parts, and it bases around a side character. And I was watching a new episode the other day, and it amazed me that it was one of the first episodes I'd ever seen where the Simpsons weren't in it at all, right? It was just all about those side characters. And that really begins somewhat with things like the Otto Show, where Otto, just this very minimal side character, is given a backstory. He's given a whole situation to work with. And obviously in this episode, he plays Bart's guitar, and he stays with the Simpsons for a while. I love Bart's impression of his mother. There's some great voiceover acting there. I love the reference to Happy Days. You know, this is not Happy Days and he is not the Fonz. And he comes and goes, "Hey, Mr. S." It's like genius. I just love that show. And the ending with the "Hail to the bus driver" is such a poignant thing. And it's one of those episodes that I think about often. So before I go on to the next one, my eighth choice, I should say, unfortunately, in skimming down and trying to be selective with the episodes, there aren't any episodes from season 4 in my 10 list here. This isn't to say that I think there aren't any good episodes in season 4, just that maybe those episodes don't spring to mind as much as some of the ones from the surrounding seasons. And with that in mind, we go to the episode with George Harrison in it, the first episode of the 5th season. I think it was a holdover, Homer's Barbershop Quartet. So many references here to the Beatles, to music in general. I used to like it when they did these things because, again, this is set in like 1984, which means that you're grounding it in a very particular musical landscape, which it makes it even funnier, to be honest. You know, Homer has a barbershop quartet. This also shows that this time that Homer is actually really skilled at something, because he wrote Baby on Board and whatever other songs they were singing. He's a skilled songwriter, man. You know, they play with that later, don't they, with the Everybody Hates Ned Flanders or whatever. But this episode is up there. I love the audition sequence. I love all the little references to the Beatles. It's just a solid episode. Everything is great. Performing on top of Moe's at the end of the episode with George Harrison going, "It's been done," is genius. The Simpsons did really well at parodying that, and I wonder if back in the day they'd had access to more stuff like they do these days, would they have thrown more in there? It didn't need it, right? It didn't need it. That episode is perfect. So we're coming into the closing stages. Bart Gets an Elephant, Season 5, Episode 17. He enters a radio competition and ends up with an elephant, mainly because he complained, because the elephant is the joke prize and the radio people expected him to take the money. In this case, this didn't happen, and thus they had to get an elephant, and thus it taught everybody, didn't it? It taught radio professionals not to offer something that you can't give. You can't give, because there might just be a 10-year-old boy at the end of the line wanting an elephant. Poor Stampy. It's got one of the early examples, hasn't it, of what Family Guy do so well. The cutaway gag. He's grooming me. That is so well done, isn't it? So we finish with Lady Bouvier's Lover, Season 5, Episode 21. Now, this is quite possibly one of the greatest Simpsons episodes of all time, simply because of the joke where Abe's walking down the street, and he picks something up and it says latex condom, and he says, "Boy, I'd like to live in one of those." Genius. Absolute genius. And when I listened to the commentary on the DVD, they didn't mention it. It just went straight by, and I was like, but that's one of the greatest jokes. And obviously the Charlie Chaplin thing, the Jimmy Durante thing, so many old-timey jokes in here. And I think one of the first appearances of Marge's mother as well. It's just wonderful. And the culmination as well, which I think is The Graduate, although I haven't seen The Graduate, so I don't know. And I'm sure that is the case with many people. Like, they've seen The Simpsons and they've appreciated these scenes without actually seeing what they're referencing. It's funny anyway, and this is one of those episodes that does it so well. The last thing I should say about this episode is that scene where Abe wants to kiss Marge's mother, and Homer tells him to play it cool, and then at the end of the sequence, where it gets all dark and kind of gloomy. He dives behind the sofa when the bell rings. And this also shows Mr. Burns as a contender, right? Which they would later play with on other episodes, including the Hellfish episode. So there we are. Those are 10 episodes of the Simpsons from the first 5 seasons that I wanted to talk to you about. What do you think of them? Do you think they're the best episodes? Are there better ones? I know that there are. Tell me what they are, and I'll see you again for maybe another one of these. Maybe we can do other themes, perhaps British sitcom episodes, just sitcoms in general. I like sitcoms. Sitcoms are great. Right, this is Jamie Dyer saying thanks for listening, and bye-bye for now.